Chapter 20. A Sister's Secret. Mangloss pushed his iron-shod staff down to the ground as if it was channeling his magic from the very soil itself. Then he rested a hand lightly on Reyes' left shoulder. A moment later the two of them were standing in Mangloss's room back at the old ruined keep. Reyes suddenly felt a lot warmer in here, as the warmth generated by Mangloss's spell soon heated the place up. "Teleport?" Reyes commented admiringly. "It's definitely a spell I need to learn." "It's useful," Mangloss agreed with a broad smile, "especially as I get older and find it harder and harder to walk." Reyes nodded. "I really don't remember you using this spell a lot back when we used to live at my father's castle." Mangloss grinned. "I do use it a lot more often now. You see, as large as the castle was, everything I needed was in relatively easy walking distance, so why use magic? Now though, it's such a long way from the keep to the edges of the encampment, and with all this snow, it's so cold and slippery out there. Teleport is safer," Reyes suggested. "So long as I know where I'm going," Mangloss replied. "It's dangerous to just teleport blind. Now, what about my canvas?" "Yes, of course," Reyes replied. He looked around the small room that Mangloss had made his home. There was so much here that was familiar to Reyes. He took a few moments to look around the room and take in all the stuff that Mangloss had accumulated over the years. The two tables that dominated the room were of most interest to him. The last time he had been here, his girlfriend Gaggara had been laying on those tables, and she had been very sick. Now she was gone, and he couldn't help but wonder where she was. Then he caught sight of the painting of a cottage hanging quietly from one of the walls of the room. Reyes needed that painting if he was going to bring Greyforth and his people in. Looking around Mangloss's room, there was one thing of which Reyes slowly became certain. There isn't enough space in here. "Good," Mangloss said calmly. "Good?" Reyes replied, puzzled. "Good," Mangloss reiterated. "It would be a struggle to fit the entire encampment onto any canvas that would fit comfortably in this one tiny little room. Actually, I'm not sure I could do it. Something would have to be left behind. By telling me that the canvas is too big for this room, you're also telling me that what you've got is of a reasonable size and might, with any luck, actually suit our purposes." "Right," Reyes said. His stomach grumbled with hunger, but he did his best to ignore it. He would find something to eat once he'd been reunited with Gaggara. Then they could share a meal together. "Good," Mangloss said cheerfully. "Come, I've set up a place elsewhere in the castle grounds to receive the canvas. Follow me." Mangloss stepped around Reyes and then beckoned him as he stepped through the illusory wall that divided this room from the outside world. Before he followed, Reyes glanced once more at the painting of the cottage. He was tempted to just take it, but it would be better to check with Mangloss first. Besides, considering what Reyes wanted it for, he couldn't see Mangloss refusing him. Reyes stepped through the illusory wall and was immediately struck by just how cold it was out here in comparison to how warm it had been inside the room. Even with Mangloss still relatively close, the cold was getting to him. It was hard to see much in the dark, but there in the middle of the old castle courtyard, a pair of harpies were flying about gathering wood for a fire. Reyes couldn't be certain, but he had a feeling that his two bodyguards, Quinnigoff and Tenegi, had ignored his last orders, and knowing where Mangloss lived, they had come to keep watch over their ward, albeit at a distance. Mangloss gave Reyes a second to get used to the outside again, and then he began to lead the way along the base of the keep towards what had once been the main entrance to the ruined keep. As he walked, he spoke. Ideally, the canvas should be placed at the very centre of the encampment. That would be right over there next to the wooden totem and exposed to all this adverse weather we've been having lately. But, Reyes said, it's not a good idea to leave a canvas out in the elements. One gust of wind and the entire spell could be destroyed. We'd have to start again, maybe even with a new canvas. So I had a small area cleared inside what had once been the main hall of this castle. "I see," Reyes said, "so long as the ceiling doesn't collapse in on us." "Quite," Mangloss agreed. Reyes looked up at the falling snow and shook his head sadly. "Do you think this snow might be enchanted?" "Enchanted?" Mangloss repeated. "Am I wrong?" Reyes asked. "I don't know," Mangloss commented. "Certainly I've never known it to snow naturally in summer before, not even at the end of summer. You could be right. It's not easy to manipulate the weather though, and to do so for so long over such a vast area. Well, it's well beyond my abilities. I doubt if even Klempo could do it." Mangloss reached the main doors of the keep and led the way through first. As he walked, he used the tinderbox spell to light some hanging lanterns so they'd be able to see where they were going and what they were doing. It was clear to Reyes that a lot of rubble had been removed from this entryway fairly recently, creating a path through to what had once been the Great Hall. He couldn't help but look up nervously at the cracked walls and ceiling, wondering if they would hold now that the rubble that had helped to support them had been removed. The Great Hall was in a terrible state of disrepair. There was a large pile of rubble in one of the corners opposite the entrance. It started at the ceiling and spread out a good way diagonally across the floor. It stopped just short of the two easels that had been placed in the centre of the room. It looked as if part of the keep had collapsed in on itself and most of it had ended up in that one pile of rubble. "I assume this room is big enough," Mangloss voiced cheerfully. "I think so," Reyes agreed as he walked carefully over to the midpoint between the two easels and tried to judge the correct place to position his palm so that the canvas would appear in exactly the right place. Once he felt he had it right, he concentrated on bringing the canvas out of the hammerstone. He had judged the leftmost of the two easels correctly. When the canvas appeared, it rested properly on the supports. However, Reyes had misjudged the right easel, only by the merest fraction of an inch, but it was enough. The canvas missed the supports and dropped to the floor, knocking the right easel over, and with all the weight of the canvas now concentrated on the left easel, it too went over with a clatter. "Nice try," Mangloss commented. "Don't worry, it won't take a minute for us to set the easels up again." "I thought I'd save us time and effort," Reyes commented. "That canvas is awkward and heavy, and though I can carry it alone, I'll need your help to get it in the right place." Mangloss grinned and shook his head. "It's much easier than that." He stepped forward and touched the canvas lightly with his iron-shod staff. The canvas floated up off the ground and rose almost all the way to the ceiling. "Now we just need to prepare the easels again and then get it to rest lightly back down." "Well, if I'd known you could do that," Reyes commented with a grin. He then set to work on the nearest of the two easels. "So, is this canvas the sort of size you were looking for?" "It will do," Mangloss teased. "Yes, you've done well. It will still take me a good few months before it's ready, but at least it won't be a struggle to fit everything inside its borders. Well, not so much of a struggle anyway." "That's good to hear," Reyes said. He lined the two easels up carefully and stepped back while Mangloss brought the canvas gently down. The easels weren't quite right. The canvas was able to rest on the supports of the left easel, but the right easel was still a little bit off. Mangloss supported the canvas with his magic until Reyes had corrected the position of the right easel. Then Mangloss released the stream of magic and let the canvas go. For a moment the right easel looked as if it was going to topple under the weight, but then it settled down again. "Good," Mangloss said. Reyes smiled, brushing his hands together, and then said, "If we're done here, I'd like to borrow that painting of a cottage you have. Is Princess Alice out of it yet?" Mangloss seemed a little surprised. "Why would you want that?" Despite the lack of dust actually on his hands, Reyes felt as if they were covered in the stuff, and he tried to clean it off by rubbing his hands along the length of his body. "I need to fetch Greyforth." "Explain," Mangloss insisted. Reyes coughed and nodded. "Greyforth is currently waiting at the ruins of Leamington. He's scared to bring his soldiers back home in case the elves see him using the doorway into the encampment. I promised I'd go and get him." "Not a good idea," Mangloss replied. "But," Reyes protested. "No," Mangloss insisted. "You are in no condition to go back out in that weather. I'll fetch them." "But Mangloss," Reyes said, "we need you. What if something were to happen to you?" "And if anything were to happen to you," Mangloss countered, "how would we get to Arlis? You control an entire harpy village. Would they still be willing to follow the king if you weren't there to guide them? Would your girlfriend even still be willing to aid us?" "No, I must go. I am a harpy," Reyes pointed out. "The elves won't even notice me." Then a sudden realization hit him. "You know where my village went?" "Of course," Mangloss said. "We brought them into the encampment at the first sign of the elves. It was Duke Ganespa's idea, actually. He suggested it wasn't a good idea to leave the harpies outside in the open if we were to come under siege. He suggested that either the harpies would be wiped out or they would change sides." "Really?" Reyes commented. "Duke Ganespa? I guess he's not as bad as Anita painted him after all. Where are they?" "I don't know exactly where," Mangloss replied. "Somewhere by one of the edges, I think. Some humans still don't want to associate too closely with them." "I must talk to Duke Ganespa and thank him," Reyes said. "Duke Ganespa didn't bring your people in to save their lives, Reyes," Mangloss commented. "He sees them as an asset, the same way he sees everything." "I see," Reyes said. "Maybe I wasn't wrong. Well, it's good that they're safe, anyway." "Indeed," Mangloss agreed, turning towards the door. "Oh, by the way, the king has made an official royal decree that henceforth all harpies are subject to fair judgment." No longer will members of your race be executed on sight for nothing more than merely crossing over into our borders. That is good, Reyes agreed. They will still be subject to human laws while they are on human land, though, Mangloss told him. If they are caught stealing from any of their human neighbours, the perpetrators could be executed. I think some of the harpies are having a little bit of trouble accepting this. They really need your guiding hand. Reyes nodded. I'll talk to them tomorrow. I have a few things I still need to do tonight. Mangloss added, you may have to give them some assurances of your own. I understand harpies don't like being cooped up in one place indefinitely. Gaggara tells me that 2 of your younger girls are due to go on their rite of passage sometime this coming week, and obviously that won't be possible with the barrier closed. Gaggara is doing all she can to calm the situation. The king suggested that we set something up inside the barrier for them, but Gaggara says it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't, Reyes agreed. Not if I understand how harpies think. Maybe if I give them some kind of reassurance. Declare them as huntresses in lieu of completing their rite. That sort of thing. It couldn't hurt, Mangloss agreed. We could certainly use all the help we can get when we hit Arliss. In the meantime, Reyes said, if you're sure I can't talk you into letting me fetch Greyful, I'll do it, Mangloss insisted. Then I need to find Gaggara, Reyes said. It's been 2 days since I last saw her. Even if she's asleep already, I'd like to see her. And I noticed she's no longer bunking in your room. She recovered from that poison a lot quicker than I imagined possible. I let her go, but warned her to take things easy for a while. I think she flew up to your room. You know, that room you and she spent the night in before you left for First Town. It's possible she's gone elsewhere. I suppose she might be with the rest of your people in their new village. I warn you though, whatever it is that she and Jenni have been conspiring about, they told me that I need to be in a certain place at a certain time tomorrow. Really? Reyes asked. He couldn't envision his sister ordering such a powerful archmage to do anything he didn't want to do. She is the queen, Mangloss explained. I guess so, Reyes said, and then he laughed. I wonder what they have in mind. Mangloss shrugged his aged shoulders. Jenni said it was something to help the morale of our people. And she managed to convince Gaggara it was a good idea, Reyes considered. Well, unless you need me further, I think I'll see if I can find her. Maybe she'll tell me what Jenni has in mind. Go ahead, Mangloss agreed, and don't worry about Greyful. I'll have him back safe before morning. Thank you, Reyes commented. He hesitated for a moment and then, deciding that Mangloss really didn't need him to hang around anymore, he walked out of the old great hall. It only took a moment for Reyes to fly up to the remains of the balcony that led to his and Gaggara's room. Then he stepped across the threshold. The smell of freshly roasted chicken seemed to permeate the very air. It was as if someone had been here recently with the purpose of delivering the bird and then leaving without being seen. Reyes could feel his stomach growling at the smell. He followed the smell over to a small wooden table. The chicken sat on a plate in one piece on the table. It was still quite hot. Reyes hoped that whoever this chicken belonged to wouldn't mind if he helped himself to a drumstick. He couldn't help but wonder that someone else might have made a claim on this room since he and Gaggara had last spent the night here. It wasn't just the presence of the chicken that made him think such thoughts. There were a number of other things about this room that had changed since Reyes had last seen this place. Someone had brought up a nice, large, and very comfortable looking mattress and placed it carefully on the floor. They had then covered the mattress with a selection of warm looking blankets. Considering how cold it was, the blankets were almost as alluring as the smell of chicken. Reyes wondered who had brought this stuff up here. It was probably some girl from his village. He was sure it would have to be a harpy. The only access to this room was via the balcony. It bothered him a lot that Gaggara didn't seem to be here. Gaggara might have brought the stuff up, but then why wouldn't she be here using it? Nibbling on the drumstick, Reyes walked over to the mattress and the comfortable looking blankets. With his eyes enhanced by the cat sight spell, he was able to make out the fancy looking leather skirt that lay on top of the blankets. Now, who did he know that wore a skirt like that? It was quite fancy, mainly black in colour as most harpy skirts were, but there were thick lines of white on both the left and right side. The front also had a fancy pattern embroidered into it with more white leather. No huntress would wear a skirt like this. It was far too ornate, far too fancy. Lying on top of the skirt was a small piece of paper. Reyes picked up the paper and opened it. He found a message, written in flourish and in Jenni's hand. Reyes, we are glad you are back. It means we can go ahead with our plans. Gaggara is going to be spending the night with us. Please don't look for her or you will ruin everything. Come the morning, wear the skirt provided. My husband will be waiting for you in the castle courtyard. He will have something else for you to wear, assuming we can prepare it in time. He will also guide you to where you are to go. Until then, sleep well and enjoy the chicken. Your sister, Queen Jenni. Reyes crushed the paper with a smile. He wondered for a while how Jenni had known he was back, but decided it wasn't important. What was important was that the chicken had been left for him, and he could help himself to the rest of it. Although he was tempted to eat the chicken quickly and then hunt down his girlfriend, he didn't want to ruin any well-laid plans that Jenni and Gaggara might have. Reyes fetched the chicken and brought it over to the mattress. There was no point freezing while he ate. He just hoped he didn't get too much grease on the blankets. He had a strong feeling that come tomorrow night Gaggara would be back with him, sharing these blankets. He was looking forward to the morning. The last few weeks since the war had started had proven quite hectic, and it would be nice to relax for a while. He just hoped he was right about what he thought Jenni and Gaggara were planning.